think as teachers what we are is we're trappers. I've got to find a way to trap this kid into engaging in the work that I want him to do and to be successful. And usually my relationship, their competence, all those become that bait and the spring that holds them in there. So you've got some good stuff there, but just think about how you're going to actually do that. And again, the hardest thing is to go in and look and say, are our people actually implementing these things? All right, because all of a sudden you're kind of standing in a issue of telling you did or didn't do it. But the reality is that most of these things are not being implemented, and when they are, they're not being implemented in ways that are going to work. We're wasting our time, you know, and it's just a matter of being able to do it in a thing that's not, you're not trying to lord over people, whatever's going on. All I'm trying to say is, here's how this has to be carried out. I'm going to come back up here and we'll close it.
Behavior management system, actually each day the teachers have to go through an integrity check, a self-check. But once a month, somebody's coming in to do it. But
Great.
They don't see what's on that sheet. So they are actually practicing because they know somebody in a month is going to come in to make sure they're doing every single one of those things. So do we think self-monitor or self-evaluation really works? Sometimes. But it really works if you know somebody's going to be coming in a month.
Absolutely.
And these are the things that they're going to be looking at.
Yeah, it's wonderful for refreshing that this is what this is what's happening. And I mean, in a situation like that, if you'd ever get into trouble, it shouldn't be a hard thing at all for every teacher to be able to tell you, here's the plan. I mean, I've looked at this every day, and been marking stuff. You're going to be way ahead of the game. That's a lot of work. But, and again, this is not easy, but doing FBAs and BIPs isn't easy. This takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. All right. So, all right. So, I guess we've got, probably 15 minutes? Yep.
Break is often written in for frustration. And you talk a little bit about time, how long they stay in their breaks. But does a break necessarily mean they have to leave? Can a break? No, it does. They don't have to actually leave. We can just say, okay, well, we just take a little break here, and then teach them how to say help. Because a lot of times what happens is they let them take a break, but then they have to come right back into the same situation that they were in before. And so sometimes we say to our kids, let's take a break, and if you need help, just tell me you need help. Or with some of our ABA kids or our BB kids, we will say, take a break, and then we might start up with more errorless type learning instead of going into where they really have to, come up with the answers themselves.
Right. Yeah, if I see somebody who's gotten frustrated to the point they need a break, that should be a cue to you as the teacher. What am I going to do to get a scaffold and help this person when they come back to not necessarily be as frustrated?
You know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
You didn't take a break, and then the teacher brings them right back into expects the same thing. Well, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, and that may be, and sometimes that could work, but you better know who you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
The other thing, the other issue is that whole idea that I don't have to leave. Getting kids back sometimes becomes an issue. Yeah. The other thing is how long I give breaks. You're actually better off to give more short breaks than you are one long one, because kids can only stay out. It's the same thing like with timeout. If you're using a timeout system, you're much better off to give a very short timeout multiple times, because opportunities to learn is what teaches learning. So I'd be much rather have a kid in timeout 5 times for 3 minutes than once for 15. They're going to learn much quicker. So same thing with a break. You need a break, get up, go get a glass of water, get a drink of water, go back, sit at your desk, put your head down, whatever's going on. Can you give signals? Again, I'll have teachers go, well, the kid knows they can ask for if they've got a question. I'll sit in meetings like this and say, does anybody have a question? And not a single hand will go up. Everybody will leave, and I'll have a line of people with questions. And it's like, didn't I just ask about questions? Right? Nobody wants to ask it in public because you don't want to look stupid. Well, developmentally, you guys are a whole lot further than most of your students are. They're not going to raise their hand and say, excuse me, while everybody else is doing the assignment, I don't get it. They're going to be quiet. So what are you doing? I used to have situations that you need a question, just push the book up to the right-hand corner of your desk. That will let me know you have a problem. I will get to you as quickly as possible. All right, what you have to do is you take something and put it on the floor. That lets me know if I've got some kids who I know need to have some sort of way to signal me they need help, or they need a break, or they need something else going on. So just think about how you protect the dignity. We were talking at break, or I forget when we were talking, lunch I guess, about, for example, if you've got a student who's got some hygiene issues, right? And how do you talk to somebody about the fact that they don't, maybe I've got a couple of kids that I'm working with that, the bathrooms are being used for everything besides showering and cleaning. All right? So how do you deal with that? Or they don't know how to shower. I remember being in a meeting one time where they talked about this young lady and how she did the process of showering herself. And it was like, yikes. All right? Somebody needs to teach her how to shower. All right? How would you begin to do that and protect one's dignity? And so we were talking about the fact that maybe I bring this student in a group of 4 students and say, you guys are going to be my teachers. We're going to go down to the 1st grade and we're going to talk about things like showering. And so I'm going to teach you all about showering, how it's done, what we do, and then you're going to go down and teach it to the 1st graders. Now I can protect that kid's dignity because I hide him in a group. But we got to think about how do we get this stuff done that allows us to do it, and yet be practical in terms of where our students are and who they are. All right, anybody have a student, and we got this few minutes that are left, it's maybe some issue that you're dealing with, questions you've got, comments that have come up from today that we want to close with. Yes?
A question that I had at the very beginning of the program. When you're doing a BIP, oftentimes, there's a question on the IEP that says, does the behavior affect, his behavior affect himself or others? Like, when do you do that BIP? When you answer, anytime you answer that question yes, or is it a certain period of time? Does it happen 1 time, 2 times, 3 times? I think people often have that question.
Anytime you've answered that question yes, if you were being audited by the state, they would be looking for an FBA and a BIP. If this is a student with an IEP, and you're saying that they have a behavior that interferes with their learning and the learning of others, you have just made the magic, you've opened the magic door.
The answer is yes.
You better have what you have to have, this is where it gets funky. What the law says is that you have to have is a BIP. All right? And so you go, okay, I've got a BIP. But then if you read in the law further, it says if you have a BIP, you have to have an FBA. Okay? Because the BIP is supposed to be informed by an FBA. So you have to have both. All right? That's if a child has a disability. It's best practice for any child whose behavior interferes with their learning and learning of others. It's a requirement for if a student has an IEP. Right? And the big issue there again becomes one of that if the behavior they're exerting is somehow interfering with their ability to either receive instruction or produce output, it's interfering with their learning. So if I'm not willing to write, if I'm doing stuff and it's going to be kicked out into the hallway or sent down to the office, right, and I'm missing instruction, or I'm refusing or somehow not engaging in the delivery of output, then my behavior is interfering with my learning. If I'm engaging in behavior that interferes with other people's learning, in terms of being disruptive, whatever's going on, then it's other people's. There, quite frankly, are very, very few kids with special needs that don't have a behavior that interferes with their learning and the learning of others. There are some, but there's not a lot. So there's probably a lot more kids than we think needed to have it.
Does anybody here use EasyIEP? Yeah. Okay. On EasyIEP, under behaviors, does it not give you the option of, it says you can either do a behavior plan if it interferes with the learning, or do you want to put in positive interventions in? So it actually gives you a choice. So you can, if you decide not to do a BIP right now, and you would prefer just to try putting in positive interventions, it actually gives you that choice on our paperwork.
Interesting.
It does.
Because the feds don't give you a choice. So that that's interesting. I mean, and this it's kind of like right now. I'm doing a lot with restraint and seclusion, and every state has its own kind of guidelines for this kind of stuff. But the feds have guidelines, and oftentimes state guidelines don't meet the feds' guidelines. And usually, if it would ever get into a real situation, Fed trumps state every time. So even though the Illinois form might say that, my gut level is that if you really got into a jam, if the kid has a disability and he's got a behavior that interferes, they're going to say, IDA is very clear. You need a BIP and an FBA. I don't care what your state form says. So I'll ask about that, though. I'll actually check into that and see what what they're saying on that and why they've done that.
And I guess that's partly where we've come into this question. You were saying earlier about almost all of our students in this room qualify for special education. So we've been trying to follow this three-tiered system of support. We don't want to automatically jump to a behavior plan for every one of our deaf and hard of hearing students who is exhibiting behavior challenges. So we have sort of been operating under this three-tiered system of we have our general universal interventions. When those are not effective, we try some secondary level check in, check out, social skills groups, different things like that. At that point, their behavior is impeding themselves or others, thus the referral to a secondary level of intervention. However, now we're feeling a little bit stuck. I was just kind of whispering to Sherry, so all of our kids then are either receiving universal level or tertiary level. We almost don't have a yellow zone anymore because of the default that all of our students already qualify for special ed.
Yeah.
And even when you do interventions, it becomes, because they're trying to push in CPS, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere else, it's like, oh, doing these tier 2, and when I say, well, mine are already, yeah, but it doesn't matter if they don't have a, that's what they're saying, if they don't have a behavior, or they're not considered, that's still a tier 2. But then, so now they're telling us then upload it, so if I do like a second step curriculum, that's evidence-based, and I'm doing that for the class, then that's not considered my social work minutes because it's considered tier 2 under uploading, so now they're expecting me to see that kid again. Otherwise, and sorry, because I have 4 schools and it's not going to happen. So then how do you, if they really want us to do it with the tier 1, tier 2, like it's like they haven't figured that out yet because all the kids are already special ed.
And I think that's the dilemma, is that these laws don't talk well to each other. And the people who do it, oftentimes special ed becomes such an afterthought that the concept works really well when they just think about kids having problems in school. And then all of a sudden you throw in a situation, and I think especially when it's like a speech and language or a hearing impairment kind of situation where, all right, I've got this general overarching issue, but that may or may not necessarily result in any kind of behavior piece. So now what do you do? And I think that's probably where we're falling in this situation. If I've got a child who's responding to the universal, and the universal interventions take care that there's no problems, I don't need a BIP. I'm fine. It's if those universals don't, now I'm in the situation where special ed law doesn't really allow me to say, well, I've got to try the secondary before I write a BIP. But your PBIS system does. So I guess, again, I was telling the group over here, you need to talk to whatever lawyer that covers your school, talk to them, because that's who's going to have to defend you. Probably what I would do in reality is I would probably write the BIP, but I would simply write it in that we're going to try the secondary tier. And those would be the interventions I'd build in if they were appropriate, because I want to make sure that they're appropriate to begin with. And that, so it would just really be a formalization of that we're moving them into these 3 things in that second tier. That would probably at least cover you in intent.
Well, and like, what is your definition of interfere?
Well, generally, if it's a situation where it substantially limits their success or it adversely affects. Okay? So, but you get into problems when you're, this is where it gets strange in terms of the fact that if you are denying me my presence I have the right to be in math class, all right? But my behavior is disrupting and you're sending me out of math class. So now you are,
An in-class removal?
if I'm still in class, I'm still able to hear, it would be a...
But you're exempt, and then time.
Oh, yeah. Well, engage. If nobody's giving me if I'm not getting like sign or some aspect to get that information, then I would probably argue that it doesn't matter that I'm in the room. If I still can't benefit from my education, you're taking it away from me. Okay? Now you've got the issue that one of the problems that we have in education all the time is none of us have the right to remove somebody's rights. Even when you have a kid who's dangerous to self or others and you restrain them, we have no right to restrain anybody. All we have is an excuse. All right? The reality is you have no right to restrain. You have no right to take me away from my education without due process of law. That's why you go to a due process hearing. So if all of a sudden I'm the parent, You're sending my kid out of math class. On the IEP, his right is to be in that math class. Well, his behavior is not allowing him to be successful there. What have you done to deal with his behavior? Show me the positive plan you've put in place to address his behavior so you don't have to send him out. And if you can't give me an answer to that, that behavior is interfering, you didn't do a behavior intervention plan on a BIP, and I'm probably going to have your butt. Because you can't show me what you did to keep you from having to send him out of math class. Okay? And that's generally what happens.
What if you don't send them out? What if, like, some of the groups are talking about they have an elective break where they can go and, like, get a drink of water and return?
And he's choosing to do it. If he's choosing to do it, you're fine.
Even if you built that in and taught that student, that's what you need to do?
Yeah, you're frustrated, you get up, because it's my choice. I'm getting up, I'm exercising my free choice to get a drink and come back in and be successful. Okay? If on the other hand, you're sending me out and I don't have a choice, now it's a little bit tougher. Okay? And that's where you build it into a plan, and part of the issue is that in a plan, the parents come in, you sit down, you share the plan, everybody on the team says, yes, I'm happy with this plan, I agree with this plan. You know, now again, you still don't have the right, but you've got, everybody's on the same page. That's why we put the plans in place. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns?
Real quick, to address the easy IEP where she says that there's a different box, I think that's probably put there from what I was told before, if the student has a 504 plan where they just need special accommodations versus the actual IEP.
Yeah. And the
I wouldn't go to easy IEP if they didn't have an IEP.
Yeah, that would even come.
So you don't use the 50, you don't use that for a 504.
Wouldn't be that way because our kids are easy IEP still waiting to have their IEP.
I will ask the question, and I will let you know, Sherry, at least what the department tells me. Although, what I find is that every time I call the state, it depends who you talk to.
Yes.
So.
But I will tell you, we asked our lawyer. Our lawyer says do a bit.
Yeah, I would be surprised if any lawyer didn't tell you that. All right. Okay. Thank you. Oh, my cartoon. I've always got a cartoon at the end. High above the hushed crowd, Rex tried to remain focused. Still, he couldn't shake on a nagging thought. He was an old dog, and this was a new trick. Okay?